Vamos a dar.
If you could please go back to your seats, we'll give a couple of minutes to those of you that are still entering the room. Well, the next presentation is Advanced Threat Analytics, Detection of Threats in the Active Directory. Fernando and Victor are the speakers. A really cool content. It's all yours. Can you hear us? You can hear me as well? Very well. So, good afternoon, everyone. We'll talk about detecting threats in Active Directory using ATA, Advanced Threat Analytics. This is Fernando Rubio. So here we go. We live at an era of war, at times of war. And at times of war, it is important to know yourself and to know the enemy, to know all sorts of things. We had the opportunity to listen to a beautiful presentation earlier today about war, cyber war. So, knowing ourselves, let's start with that. That means that we need to know about the changing environment around us, mobile devices, the Internet of Things, the cloud. The environment is changing. Knowing the enemy implies knowing what threats we are facing. From our point of view, in our experience in threat detection, almost everyone boils down to credential theft, phishing, and very few other things. So this is not just about knowing ourselves and knowing the enemy. We need to take into account the changes that are taking place. It is not enough with defending your perimeter, with building a higher wall or a thicker wall. No, we now have to protect identities. And if we go into the detail, when you call Microsoft for incident response, it's always the same story. Someone got a phishing attempt. They click on the button to install malware or whatever it is. And by the way, I'm very pessimistic. Even if there wasn't a button, they would find a way to have something installed that would infect them. So you have one PC compromised, they steal credentials, they use a keylogger, they take it out of the browsers, of local accounts, whatever. They want to get to someone, they want to go somewhere else, a workstation. But they need to get the workstation that administers that domain. I remember reading someone whose goal was to get hold of 6 sysadmins. Okay, they're out hunting, so to say. That takes you to the domain controller, and from there you can control the entire organization. Take a look at this, an important idea that comes out of this. If before we defended the network perimeter, we did perimeter networks, now that we defend identities, we have to do the same thing. So how common is it in your organizations to do things differently? So what are we doing? We're breaking the segmentation. There is a zero layer, so to say, domain controllers, and anything above it. You don't use a domain controller outside of that layer. Layer 1 with servers, with the information, and layer 2 where you have the workstations that they use as an access point. What lessons do we learn from all this? Well, attacks are getting increasingly sophisticated. During this conference, I'm sure you'll get a lot of information about attacks. We've been hearing about this. The degree of sophistication of attacks is higher and higher. What is the target? The target is identities. Take a look at the top. That yellow period, which is usually 24 to 48 hours, is critical when protecting identities. Because this is where an attacker will try to get administrator privileges. As soon as they've got administrator privileges, they can do whatever they want. Most attacks go unnoticed, so they may remain in place for 11 or up to 12, 14 months. It is important to take into account what response plans we have in place. If we assume that we can be victims, we have to be on the ready and have response plans in place. This is not an easy task. Sometimes this is very costly. We don't know the extent to which we have been compromised, and sometimes it is simply impossible. So, if it's okay with you, the first thing we will show is a demo to show how the attack takes place. So we have a lab where we will be conducting the demos for this presentation. Very simple. 3 boxes. One, the domain controller with the data center. It's got a central console. And then we have 2 workstations, 2 client workstations, from where we will simulate a number of operations. I wanted to tell you also about the typical environment that we face when talking about the cyber defense or potential threats that we might face. One of the most common threats that may be happening millions of times per second is a scanning attempt. Someone is probing our network to find out about it. This is something that can be detected in many different ways. The goal is to get a number of machine addresses and IP addresses. Fernando will try to do an FXR transfer from our DNS server, an easy place, yes? If we launch that scanning attempt, we've done our homework. We have our area transfers protected. We don't allow transfers to any boxes. So, in a successful attempt. But this is the very basics. This is what happens millions of times per second, as I said before. Brute force attack. A brute force attack is about someone making an attempt to validate. We will try to get access with an account with multiple passwords. By the way, now that Fernando is showing the tool, in this demo we will be using a large number of tools. Lawyers at Microsoft don't like us telling anyone on how to hack Windows. We will not show you how to hack Windows. We will tell you about threats. We will tell you about the procedures underneath, the processes underneath, because we want you to understand about defense and protection. But there will be certain processes that have been automated using scripts, and we will not go down in depth. What you saw in this script is a function trying to do a simple bind to an administrator account with 20 attempts for that password. Did you execute it? Right, so we had an attempt using brute force. What else can we find? It is not always active attacks. It is not always someone trying to get in the way. Sometimes they're just listening, waiting for us to release information that is sensitive. For example, a password passed from one unit to another. If we validate using an administrator account, user mother, password fucker, we love that. If that is the case, we would be applying a bad practice or carrying out a bad practice, because we would be disseminating or broadcasting sensitive information. We cannot pay attention to the event viewer all the time, of course, but we really have to exercise common sense. We're not using SSL, okay? This is flat text, plain text, so that we are validated against the domain controller for a user with administrator privileges. I did this on purpose, otherwise I would use Kerberos. But in all reviews we do, there is an event in domain controllers every 24 hours telling you the simple binds in plain text. I haven't done a single review in 10 years where I haven't seen that problem. If you're the security guy in a company, well, take that into account. It's usually VPNs, proxies, passwords in plain text. Sometimes it's as simple as changing the port. But anyway, I've been authenticated. These are very basic threats. But if we go into more serious things, we could see credential theft, okay, or an attempt to steal credentials. We will attempt it and we will do it. In the next demo, we will steal credentials using hashbash. This is an attack technique based on the fact that for a validation, NTLM doesn't need the password. It only needs the hash, the validation hash. If we get hold of that validation hash, we can obtain those privileges in another box. How can we get hold of that hash? Two ways. One, by going to the local SAM for that Windows computer and getting that hash. That would be useful for local accounts. We're attacking the local SAM. If we have two workstations with the same account and same password, we could use that. Just imagine the typical situation where all local users are administrators, same account name and same password. If the domain administrator is the same, well, you can imagine, but getting access to that hash through the local SAM, we could reach higher privileges in a very simple way. Another option, no need for the local SAM, LSASS, getting hash for the user that validated against that machine. If that user is an administrator, just imagine the hash we would get. By the way, Microsoft has a free tool called Labs. Very simple. You distribute it to the different computers, and every n number of days the password will be changed. Apart from changing it, it changes it in the Active Directory. So you get rid of that problem with the local administrator, and the help desk people, when they log in through a client workstation, they will not use the same username, they will use the local administrator. If that is stolen, that credential is not valid to access anything. So let's go to the demo. As you see on the screen, what Fernando is showing, we have user 1. If we try to access the administrative resource that you see here, we will not be granted that access. Now, we will steal credentials using hashbash. I've opened a new terminal window. Here I have my higher privileges. I'm still user 1, but if I go to the administrative resource, I do have access to the domain controller. My privileges are higher now. Remember that period, 24 to 48 hours. After that, I can do whatever I like. Anything. Doing a backup, getting rid of deleting users, adding new users. This is our daily practice. This is what we see every single day. Seems like a funny thing to do, but believe us. You may believe us. When we do incident response, this is the type of issues we find. This is 2017. I don't know about your companies, but in most companies we see this is what we have to avoid. Okay? It sounds like a joke, because this is such an old technique, but this is what most companies are facing right now. So what are we suggesting for detection? Here's where we start talking about ATA, Advanced Threat Analytics. This is the tool that will be in charge of detecting things, of course. This is our cybersecurity reference architecture, not the only product, of course. There's other things there. You have the entire model. ATA is here in two places. On the one hand, you've got it on the identity side, just next to the Active Directory. It only makes sense if we use Active Directory. This is for detecting threats on Active Directory. And then at the top, SOC. It is integrated perfectly there. And then when we see how to use it, you see how it makes sense. So what is it exactly? This is an on-premise tool, okay? This is not in the cloud. If you have everything in the cloud, obviously you can set it up in the cloud just as another virtual machine. It works in two ways, okay? It does machine learning exactly as they do with credit cards. If you spend 50 euros with your credit card in Madrid and suddenly you start spending millions in Las Vegas, it's quite likely that it's not me. Well, it's the same philosophy. If Jack logs in through the same computer, accessing the same resources, and suddenly they start connecting to 200 servers, that is not normal. The second thing is those things that are detected in a deterministic way. That hash, how can it be detected? Well, user 1 logged in. If I did run us, we would have a log on. We have a log on of an administrator, but I don't see that. I see authentication, ETLM, with a connection sent as if it was an administrator. This is not normal. Hash. From day one, this gets detected. The good thing that it works this way is that machine learning generates less false positives. False positives are a problem with these tools. Here we have a list of the threats that can be detected by this version of ATA. Threats evolve, attacks get more and more sophisticated, so as new threats come along, they will get added to the product. And there are four main blocks or categories of threats. Abnormal resource use, as what Fernando said, someone accessing a resource for which they have no access. And then scanning attempts, what we saw before, if someone tries to obtain information and is unable to do so. And then attempts to steal credentials. And then malpractice in configuration, in security configuration. For example, validation using plain text. Exchanging passwords in plain text. So how does ATA work? Well, first of all, this is not something you put at the domain controller level. We're monitoring the network. What I really like about this is two things. First is that the network never tells you lies. There are lots of tools that monitor events. Yeah? The problem with events is that they can be deceitful. I can send whatever events I like if I become administrator. In fact, people in the Active Directory don't need to know. But you do have to talk to the guys over our communication because you want to listen to that traffic. They need to know. From then on, you can do lots of things. For example, in Windows, the authentication is Kerberos. If not, NTLM. In Kerberos, some things are coded. But who is the user validating? What resources are they accessing? From what box? Well, that goes in plain text. By sniffing at the network traffic, it works. Encrypted RPC using LTM. So that server is validating someone, but we don't know who is validating, from what client, and so on and so forth. For that, we also take event viewers. We can take them from the domain controllers itself. If you have a CM, you can forward events from CM to this tool. And since we talk about CM, it goes the other way around. This will generate alerts, so we can forward it to CM. The important idea is that we don't install anything at the domain controllers. In Active Directory, no need to know anything. But then, if our domain was compromised, they don't know that we are seeing it. If they know we've noticed, they reformat machines. In this case, the machine is not in the domain. This is the first thing. Okay, sorry, I was mentioning the previous slide. And then abnormal use. It needs to learn, and it needs 3 weeks. Why weeks? Well, usually our users behave the same on Mondays or Wednesdays, but not on those 2 days. So it learns for 3 weeks. That doesn't mean that it learns forever. Whatever was normal or whatever is abnormal can go the other way around. The typical example is a user that has been relocated to another department and starts traveling throughout the world. Well, they will be detected because they will have, in theory, abnormal behavior, but it is not abnormal behavior. There are some alerts that the system will need to learn about for 21 days. At the end of the day, there will be correlations. The system will not tell us that the user is accessing one resource. Another capacity, another functionality. We see that all users have a very similar profile. There isn't anyone accessing thousands of resources. Whenever we have a new user, if they start behaving that way, it can be detected to know how everyone is behaving.
Parece, en vez de verlo aquí, pues lo vemos en la propia consola. Toma, te dejo el ratón.
Muy bien, préstame tu ratón.
Vale. Mientras va conectando, recordar que hicimos reconocimiento de DNS, hicimos una fuerza bruta por LDAP, luego hicimos un simple bind que funcionó y por último el pass de hash. Pues a ver cómo ha aparecido eso. Te tienes que ir al cliente 1.
Sí, efectivamente.
Pero salte pantalla completa, tío.
Va casi mejor, sí.
Venga, va. Da igual.
No, me salgo de pantalla completa, que es más fácil. Vale, y ahora... Un segundito. Venga, vamos a nuestro cliente 1, es este, no, este es el DC, ¿verdad?
Bueno, da igual, ¿eh? Sí, lo tenemos abierto.
Pero lo veo aquí en cliente 1, que me gusta más si estoy en cliente 1.
All right, this is our ATA console. I will tell you very quickly. So So the first thing that I want to show you is the timeline, which is timeline where these threats have been generated. Notice the activities that we did before: recognition attack through DNS, brute force attack, exchange of password in plain text. We stole identities. So timeline is arranged chronologically. So here this is arranged by colors. So these colors are very obvious. It tells us about possibilities, threats, and red tells us about the level of criticality. So this tool also helps identify false positives or asks us about that. If you go to DNS recognition, the first thing that it asks me is, are you sure that this is not one of your DNS servers? Or are you sure that this is not a machine from what you are doing the scanning? Well, the answer is no, we are fully sure. So it gives us so much information in a very simple manner. If I go here, I see data, and I can open that. And here I see lots of intuitive information about the accounts, suspicious activities, that is to say, an exclusive timeline in all the activities that have been carried out from these equipments. And also what Fernando told us about contextualizing threats or detention. If I did 20 attempts of brute force, it is not that I have 20 different entries, but I have just one entry on the timeline telling me about those 20 attempts. Actually, notice that there are 21. So there is an extra one because we did our validation. And here it also recommends us what to do. Sometimes recommendations are very specific. I'm sure that this has happened, do this. Another says careful, research this equipment or these accounts or carry out any corrective actions for that. In the case of DNS recognition, it has warned us about that, even if we did not succeed in doing that. And then in terms of these attempts, brute force, it has told us, it's telling us that the password has been obtained and that has been validated on plain text. So I like it here because it says S and then it says in green, and in this time we have yellow, not not highly critical, but it tells me I'm researching this because it's critical, because it belongs to domains admins. And here I see lots of information about the criticality. So therefore it's very easy for me to move around to get more information. So brute force attack, the exchange of credentials in plain text, and here stealing of my credentials. And this is not telling me this may be the case. No, it is fully sure. It cannot identify where the administrator hash has been obtained. What we did in our demo was to attack the local sum of a team through an account whose password may be in a different machine. So therefore, we have obtained this value. This operation has been local. No traffic has been generated. ATA doesn't know where that information comes from, but it knows for sure that someone is using privileges. So, well, now we have more time for more demos. So this is very easy to set up as any Microsoft tools. This is a company. We bought this 2 years ago. So what can you set up? Well, there is an architecture. It allows you to have several seats. And then it says, OK, give me a user account so that I have a list of all the users. Then it tells me about the events, tells me where you are going to send it from the controllers or CM controllers, and then it asks me to define a honey token. That is to say, a user that we don't use for anything else. We refer to it as super user, and they will generate an alert whenever needed. Then we also have exclusions. So if we have a machine on Nexus, we can exclude it because we just don't want it to recognize DNS all the time. And then with the ticket pass, we may have false positives. So therefore, we have the option to say leave it out, and then I'll show you how to detect that. And then I can tell you about the email server or syslog to resend alerts, and that's it. This is as much of setup that you have to do. What is most difficult for this product is to tell to production people that they have to double the traffic on switches, and well, that's as much work as you have to do. All right, net use, super user. We'll try Honey token now. And I'll tell you more as I do it. We'll tell you about other attacks, golden key, tickets pass, diamond key, golden ticket, diamond tickets, golden tickets, and skeleton key. So after user, column, go left. Thank you, Raul. So because we don't know, we just enter super user. So very quickly. So Kerberos. This is, this is made up of 3 phases, not 4. The user logs on, and then 3 derivatives come out of the password. One is based on RCDs and AAS. If your domain is 2008 and you have not enabled it, you have only 3. And then from those derivatives, after log on, it goes to domain control. And then it says, I want to validate. And then we have, OK, RCS support. And then I said, I need validation. And because, well, they decide to use AS. And then the client encrypts the hour. And then the other does the opposite. OK, I decipher, and then I get the right time, and then it is you. And then I give you a ticket, a granting ticket that allows you to get other tickets. And then it also tells you about the group you belong to and the privileges that you have. The user gets it, but cannot see the content of the ticket because it is encrypted and it is signed with a hash of an account. It appears as a disabled account, but it is used by Kerberos. Then I try to connect to a server of the intranet and says 401, you require authentication, and then I want to get my Kerberos tickets. And then I get this granted ticket, I show it, and I said, I want to do this. The domain control encrypts it, validates who I am, and then gives me the same ticket, but this time encrypted with a password that the server knows. I get that ticket, I show it to the server, and then it authenticates me. OK, that would be Kerberos. So the first thing that we're going to do is pass the tickets. If I am the administrator of a machine and then a user has been validated, and then I can steal the credential of the user. At the end of the day, I'm stealing the ticket. I take the ticket from the memory and I take it to a file. I could use it in the very same machine, but it doesn't really make sense because it was already in that machine. I want to use it in another machine. I take it to another machine. I just send out the reverse command, and then from the file, I just build up a ticket, and then I can validate myself in another machine. And someone asking me, how do you detect that? Well, the ticket, you gave it to one machine and it's being used in another one. That is very trivial. And if you tell me, well, if my machines are behind NAT, why are you going to generate false positive? Well, because you may believe that there are 2 different machines and at the end it's only one. If sometimes when you have 10-minute leases, OK, that may be detected as a false positive. We have gone to client number 2 now, and here we can see the tickets in that machine. So client and the server area is important. The client says that that ticket has been given to the server. And when it says that it's been given for GRKB, that means that it's a big ticket for Kerberos service. It also says that it uses AAS, and then the ticket now is valid for 10 hours. Well, but it can be renewed for a week, but only for a week. Often attackers use it as an intermediate way. And when they want to achieve persistence, they use the techniques we will be showing you very soon. And the script has copied that to client number 1. Okay, we go to client 1, and then from the file, I put it in memory. So launch a klist to see all the users. So client, it says user 1, okay, GBT, and then another one for sys. So it means that for each service that I want to carry out, I need a ticket. So to do -- you need a different ticket, different from the one that I got from Kerberos. So I will try to go to $C. Okay, so to pass the ticket. Well, the problem with pass the ticket, how do you protect yourself against that? I gave you a hint before. So if you manage that to travel across your organization, you deserve heaven. So that means it is known as credentials hygiene. So I'm telling you about the pass hash, but pass the tickets. Well, they may introduce a keylogger in your machine. Yes, and loggers can also be introduced in Windows. So at the end of the day, the problem is a general problem. That is to say, the stealing of credentials. So the main idea, what is essential here, is the model of the 3 layers that I proposed to you before. Do not log on ever as client 2, because if that is compromised, they may steal it from you. Sometimes the attackers take away the proxy. What do you do next? You log on the machine, and then you steal the credentials, and then they take it from there, and they escalate privilege. So tickets, same as before, same time, renewable, AS 256 $C, and it tells us that everything is fine. Okay, I delete space. Next. Now we are trying to achieve persistence. Don't wait for me. We will replicate the hash of the password of KRGBT. Because in the first authentication, I encrypt the hour with the hash, and then it gives me a ticket which has been encrypted with KRGBT. If I know that, I can create my own tickets, and that is golden tickets. How are we going to get that hash? Now we are administrators, and we go to domain control, and then we ask it to replicate the password for me. And I say, okay, you have the privilege to replicate passwords. And they said, well, this is a domain control that I have just promoted. And some tools use that very same privilege. The one that comes to mind, if you are synchronizing to the Microsoft Cloud, there is an option for setup that says I can synchronize hashes of my hashes. If you enable that, that account needs to have a number of privileges. If you don't enable it, and you don't need to replicate passwords in the cloud, you will not have those passwords. If you have that, well, pass the ticket is already there. Let's take a look at it. And then you also have honey token. So it's a B. And then pass the ticket. Tells us whether the machine is behind NAT or not. And it says, okay, I give the ticket to client 2, and the ticket is being used in client 1. So let us wait for a minute up until we get the alert detecting the replication. So we are going to detect golden tickets. Golden tickets detection requires us to have 5 days of data on the machine. And this is so because we're going to do 2 things. Well, first of all, what's a golden ticket? Golden ticket is the actual attacker generates his own TGT. How can you do that? Well, because he has replicated the password of key RGBT, he can generate his own ticket. Then the first 2 steps have been skipped, and this is what we detect. We detect skipping of those 2 steps. And then we also detect that they are using RCS4. All right, do you have it there? So 5 days of data, we have just set this up. We are going to stop the database and we're going to inject 5 days of data. So we are playing around with it. And what else can I tell you about golden tickets? Well, first, that account has a hash that never changes. And this is so because Microsoft does not change the password. For how long have you had that account with that very same password? Well, those of you who have gone up to 2008, well, since you set up the domain 2002, 2001, the same password continues to be there. And what are the consequences there? Well, we did that by replicating it in real time. But imagine the backup people in your company. Well, it is encrypted, yes, but when you give me the backup of a domain controller, I can get it. So what I mean is that a backup made 10 years ago could also be a good thing, could also be valid for me. What is the best practice? Change it. Well, actually, you have to change it 2 times. You have to change it twice because, well, the previous password and the next password are valid. You cannot change it 2 times, one after another. So if what you are doing is doing that proactively, perhaps you have to change it once a month. Then you reset it so that tickets after a month stop being valid. Then also in all systems, well, you may have problems. And if you have problems, do not call me. It's a good thing that you do it. It's a good idea, but do it carefully. What else? Do we have our golden tickets? No, not yet. Have you entered the 5 days of data? Well, I don't know whether you noticed that when we were stopping the database, it tells us that it uses a Mongo database. That's what's behind it, non-relational. Honey tokens, well, we have launched golden tickets, and it will detect it for us. This is special. It is using RC4. We had it there. No, that was ticket for client 2. Yeah, I saw it. It was 10 years. The person who made this tool made it to last for 10 years. Some versions make it last for 10 hours. It uses RC4 and then it expires in 2027. So this key skeleton, this is a master key. The attacker wants to log on as any other user. You may go and say, well, you may reset the password. Yes, but then users will find out. Then you inject it in the domain controller. I'm going to launch the skeleton key. No, that's not the right one. So this one creates that master key. Remote skeleton key. Okay, do it again. All right, how does this work? As I was saying, or actually what it's doing, so it has control to the domain controller, has copied files, and now it will do hooking. It will make hooking in 2 functions. So with the domain controllers that support RC4, this is going to say, I only support RC4. How do you detect it? Because it does it in this way, because it cannot do it through AES. And then second says, when you request the encrypt function, request it twice. And why does it work only with RC4? This is so because IS uses something. So 2 users with the same password do not generate the same hash. And then IS, when you hash, it consumes lots of CPU. So therefore, imagine that you have to do that malware, that malicious software. If you have to validate that very same password for all the users, you either pre-compute the hash generated for each of the password of each of the users, and that would take up lots of memory, or you calculate it real time. But that will take up lots of CPU. So the bigger the domain, the easier it is to detect. The tools that you know, it does downgrade to RC4. It's good that it says that it only uses RC4. So the same password, no matter the user, generates always the same hash. I launched the other script. Perhaps now we need to play the video. Well, it is not detecting them, not yet. This is not exact. Sometimes alerts take longer, sometimes they take shorter. So, well, more or less, we often wait for 15 minutes. So malicious replication that has been detected. So the tool should detect golden tickets, and then the last one will detect this exec with a remote code tool. So go back to PPT. Now we go to this kill chain. So sophisticated attacks. No matter how sophisticated attacks are, the tool can identify them. And Fernando told you how each of them are detected and in which points. If those attacks become more sophisticated over time, the tool can be adapted to detect those attacks. Then we double the traffic of the switches just to detect the attacks. The tool has done only detection, has not made any corrections, no nothing, but it has alerted us about all the attacks that have been launched. And last, response incidents. Two things. I don't know whether you've seen the recommendations that it gave us. Switch off, do forensics. But it is good to know what happens in that account. So then it tells you, well, this user has been trying to access those machines over a month. And then you remember the SOC. Then I would like to tell you, well, we are very happy to take any questions that you may have.
Gracias.
¿Alguna pregunta por ahí?
Questions? I have a question, Vicente. What happens when I have a reverse proxy and has to pass on Kerberos ticket to an app and I am just in the middle? It will detect exactly the same as if you were behind NATs. What you have to do is just to leave it out of the pass the ticket. Therefore, if I load the pass the tickets, it means that I have like a free entry. Yes, you have it. Okay, thank you very much for your talk. And the question is very obvious. How does this tool behave if we all go to the cloud? Everything is Active Directory. We have the machines in the domain. Even if we go beyond that, does this have a capability to detect foreign things in an Active Directory V2C? And the second question, have you found any attacks trying to fake ATA so that it is not detected? Well, through Active Directory, this is not good for it. This is for just an Active Directory as such. If you have an Active Directory in the cloud, this is good for it. And actually, you should have it. And actually, you don't want any controller to be left out. Having said that, well, this is a company that we bought a couple of years ago. The machine learning technology is going into being introduced into a product, Azure Identity Protections. So at the end of the day, this is exactly about the same thing abnormal behaviors. They're being logged on from Tor net when you have, and this is that for your, well, whenever the entities are in the cloud. And the second example that I will show you is quite recent. So whenever there is a response incident, this is what we do when we are called to go there. The first thing that we do is to set this up. It gives us a view much better than if we go and take a look at all the events. But events aimed at avoiding these directly, I haven't found any. I'm not aware of any. As Fernando said before, this tool is intended to be as silent as possible so that it is not easily detected. So it is very young tool. So we still haven't been in that scenario that you mentioned, but it could happen. And sometimes we get questions, and even as well, we know some of the information, but sometimes we don't know much. We don't know much more about the architecture of the product. So our lawyers do not let us show you the tool so that we don't focus on the tool. Golden tickets, you all do it with the same tool, but if tomorrow if you had another tool to do it, it will also detect it. It's about detecting techniques. Could you fake it? Well, could be faked. Why not? Any other questions? In the beginning of your presentation, you said that it takes 3 weeks before the system is fully set up. But then you also said that when you go to the company in trouble, then you just plug it in, you just install it to analyze it. Yes, but because there is no abnormal behavior, it is just being set up, it detects it immediately. It requires 3 weeks to understand users' behavior and to understand and to generate alerts. Abnormal use of resources, that is also available, but that requires 3 weeks of data. And then some alerts are mixed. They need to have 5 days of data of the users to see that there has been a downgrade. But some activities are detected right from the beginning. So it tells you that this user doesn't do this regularly, and this time it's trying to do this and that. And it is as explicit as we have showed you with other attacks. But in that case, you need those 3-week learning periods, and it is just impossible for us to simulate it here. Right, if there are no more questions, thank you very much for your attention.